In this video, I'm going to explain how I like to play the late game and give you guys some tips so that you can win more matches in Fortnite and stop choking in the late game. If you find this video helpful, please do remember to give it a like, rating, and subscribe if you would like to see more. I live stream pretty much every day on this channel, so if you guys want to see me play live and ask me any questions about the late game, come to my stream and I'll be happy to answer them. So a lot of people have issues with choking in the late game, and I think a lot of this just comes down to the fact that they're not comfortable in the late game. They haven't made it there a lot. When people often think about how to improve, they just try to hot drop or drop tilted and get in fights, and they think they're quote unquote getting better. And this is true that they might get better in like the just mechanical sense, like building and shooting. But as far as late game, improving at late game, pretty much the only way you're going to get better at that and be comfortable with being in the late game is by getting there often and being in that situation a lot. So that's one of the first tips, is just to make it to the late game more often and familiarize yourself with the late game. That way you're less stressed about it. That's just one of the biggest things. If you're choking, is because you're stressed and nervous about the late game. And if you get there more often, you're going to be nervous less. So that's like one of the biggest things, is just to get in there and get more experience in the late game. Find out what works for you. I'm going to give you how I play, and it's kind of like systematic in a lot of ways. So even if you are nervous, if you just focus on executing this, you should be able to get wins regardless. But I think getting a lot of experience in the late game will definitely help you not be nervous. It's not necessarily wrong that you're nervous, and it'll hopefully go away over time. So don't like get stressed that you are getting nervous or choking in the late game and think that's how things will always be potentially. Just get in there and play and try to improve on your mistakes so that you can get better in the future. I think it's very important in the late game, or just pretty much any point of Fortnite, is to make sure you have a lot of mats. A lot of people get into the late game and they have like no material. So make sure you have material, make sure you're gathering material throughout the game, and so that you have some for the late game, because a lot of the late game just comes down to rotations, and the way you're going to rotate is either by having material or by having mobility items. Launch pads are the most valuable mobility item because you can carry a lot of them, and they don't take up an inventory slot, so you can carry other things in addition to the launch pads. You don't have to give up anything to have them. So try to get launch pads throughout the course of the game. I always talk about this on my stream. The supply drops are very helpful for this. In Season 8, supply drops get shown on the map, so you can always go for them and try to get launch pads out of them, which is a pretty common item to get out of the supply drops, but they often create fights. So just weigh the risks. You might want to go for more supply drops throughout the course of the game. That way you can get launch pads, or just kill more players. That way you are more likely to get launch pads. So material and mobility is key. If you have a rift to go, glider redeploy can be very helpful. You just have to be careful with it because you can get lasered out of the sky pretty easily. So know how to use redeploy properly. What else is in the game? Balloons I wouldn't really recommend too much. But yeah, mobility is very, very, very helpful in the late game because it makes rotating a lot easier, and you can conserve material on your rotations, which is a big thing with the recent mat cap changes that they made in Season 7. The bulk of this video I want to talk about is be careful about how you fight players. If you're just taking every fight in the late game, you're going to get third-partied and you're going to get killed. A lot of times the late game just slows down to the point where nothing is happening. So let's say you have like you and 5 others. So there's 6 total people in this zone in solos, and everybody's just hiding, built up, playing off snipes, whatever they're doing. Nothing is happening. If you then engage on somebody, you're definitely going to get third-partied because nothing is happening and you're the only person making anything happen. So many people play the late game just to third-party. So if you're really aggressive in the late game, you're likely going to get third-partied. And that can be okay if you want to play aggressive. Just understand that you're probably going to get third-partied. I think one of the biggest things you want to do, or that I try to do at least, is keep track of how many players I have alive, especially when the game gets to like these stalemate situations. Keep track of how many people you have alive and how many people you know about, and try to predict where the others might be that you don't know about. So let's say you have 5 people left, right? You see like 3 bases, so you can assume that there's 3 people in, like a person each in one of those bases, and then you have 2 unknown players. And then just try to find out where they might be. Try to just prepare yourself for where they might be if you're going to get third-partied. If nothing is happening, a lot of times you don't want to fight unless you have to. But alternatively, if a bunch of other people are fighting, you can be the third party. You can go and fight them. Or if you know where somebody is and the rest of the lobby is fighting somewhere else, or there is a lot going on, then you can engage on that player without as much of a likelihood of getting third-partied. Third-partying is always going to be prevalent, and it's going to be something that a lot of players play for, especially the ones who are nervous. A lot of people just play off snipes in the late game, and then that's all they have. All they have is the snipe, and if you don't get sniped by them, you don't lose, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I think the biggest thing, like I said, is just keep track of the players you know about, where they are, if you can cut off their rotations, things of that nature. That way you're hopefully not getting third-partied as much. I think a lot of people, that's like one of the biggest things I see people complain about in my chat is they say like, oh, I'm getting third partied in the late game, or I'm really good, but I can't win. It's likely these things. You're probably taking too many fights, or you're taking fights when you don't have enough information on where the other players are. So it's not like a calculated risk. You're just taking risks and then you don't understand why you're getting third partied. Big build fights in the late game are pretty much something that you do not want to do unless you like absolutely have to. Because one, you burn through your mats. You're probably not going to get much more because you are in the late game. So you burn through your mats and you're drawing a lot of attention to yourself. Especially the lesser skilled players are going to want to third party that and knock that down because they're nervous and they don't want to like fight those players that are good at building. And you're just an easy kill and people want those easy kills. So try to avoid big build fights if you have to, or unless you have to rather. I understand that there are some fights that you just have to take and that's how it is, but you don't want to be the one forcing that onto the opponents if you don't have to. I try to win the late game on rotations because that's something that a lot of people struggle at. And if you get good at rotating and you get good at getting good positioning, then you're going to win a lot more games because this is something that a lot of players struggle with. So if you're good at that and most people are weak at it, you're going to have a huge advantage. And that comes to our next point, is to focus on rotating and giving yourself the best position you can. A lot of people feel the need to like try to end the game before we get to these moving circles, or try to end it in the first or second moving circle, whatever, you know, they want to end the fight right away. Just focus on rotating, getting yourself the best positioning you can, and then punish the players who don't have that good positioning. Obviously, there's going to be times where you and another guy are like on top of each other and you have to kill him to proceed. That's understandable. It is what it is. I'm talking mainly about how if you're shooting people too much and you're not even in the zone. Like, let's say there's two people in the zone and you're outside of the zone just shooting at them. You need to be trying to get to the zone. Like, you're making yourself an easy target as it is, but if you're shooting at them, they're going to shoot back. You want to focus on getting into the zone first, and then you punish the people who are outside of the zone. This is just really consistent anyways, because once at this point, the storm hits for 10 a second, and you can get in a lot of situations where you're already in the zone, the opponent isn't, you shoot at them, and then they spam build, right? Everybody spam builds whenever they get shot because it's just a natural instinct at this point in Fortnite. And if people are nervous and they don't necessarily build properly, they often get themselves stuck. And even if they get stuck for a second, this can be 10 damage. But not only is it 10 damage right that second, but you can shoot at them again, they spam build again, and then they're getting hit for 10 a second again. There's a lot of times where you can get your opponents on these easy fights on the edge of the storm, where a lot of times it doesn't matter how good they are, because they either have to choose between getting shot by you or getting hit by the storm for 10 a second. That's why I focus on rotating, because you get these easy fights for yourself. And if you were shooting at them before, your guns might not be reloaded, especially if you're me. I'm like really bad at reloading a lot of times. So I try to just focus on rotating because a lot of people aren't as good as it. They like are way too focused on the kills, and they're not focused enough on staying alive and getting to the zone. Or they're too focused on staying alive and they're not getting to the zone. They're not taking the necessary risks to get to the zone. And that's another reason why you want to have a lot of material and why you don't want to force fights that you don't have to, because you want to have a lot of material so that you can rotate and get yourself good positioning in the zone. If you don't have material, like, you're screwed, and if it's going to be harder for you to get to the zone potentially, and also it's going to be like more risky for you to get to the zone. Another reason why those launch pads are so pivotal, or any of that movement that we talked about before, because you can use that to like basically bypass the rotating portion, get to the zone first, and then punish the other players. It's really, really, really easy to win a game where you launch pad to zone and then just cut everybody off. It's like basically a free win. So if you like, that's why I was saying those launch pads are so helpful, because it essentially takes the skill out of rotating. You can just see where the next zone is, rotate if it's close or if it's somewhat far, launch pad to it, beat the other players, and then get the easy kill. Another thing that launch pads can allow you to do is rotate late. If you're in a fight with somebody, like let's say you get in one of those fights, maybe you forced it, or it was just a fight that had to happen just because naturally how you and the other guy positioned yourselves, you end up fighting. Like, that's going to happen sometimes. What you can do if you have a launch pad is you don't have to worry about rotating. You can wait until you're basically getting hit by the storm. Just keep him there, get what damage you can in. He's worried about rotating. Launch pad to the zone, beat him anyways, and then put more pressure on him. So launch pads, there's just so much that you can do with launch pads. If you watch me live, I try to take advantage of them in the late game, not only because it's easy wins, but when you guys see these things, you can apply it to yourself, and it's easy wins for anybody. I think it takes very little skill to execute on. All it comes down to is staying calm and making the correct decision, and that's why we talked about before that you want to stay calm and get more experience in the late game. That way you're not as stressed. Just focus on making the correct decisions, focus on playing your rotations correctly, where the next circle is, what opponents you can punish, things of that nature. If you're just nervous and reacting to whatever you see, you're probably not going to put yourself in good positions, and you're not going to win a lot of games. High ground is very important, and it is always very important in Fortnite. But it's not worth it at all times because of the way these zones move. When a zone hits, once you get to the moving zones, it moves to the next. It moves to one, right? And then it immediately starts going to the next one. So if you burn all of your mats on that first rotation because you're like fighting somebody for high ground, this is why I was saying you want to avoid build fights. If you burn all your mats on that first circle and then you don't have mats to rotate for the second one, you're probably going to die right away unless you kill somebody and get mats from them. But that isn't always a surefire thing, especially when the zone is coming. You might not be able to obtain those mats. So high ground is nice if you can get it, but just know that some players you might want to give it up to because you'll be able to punish them later if they waste their materials fighting for it, and you don't want to be in that bad position wasting the material for your own. A lot of this stuff just is judgment calls. If you can end the game off that high ground in that circle, then maybe it's worth it. But if you're going to have to go another circle or two, you probably don't want to fight for high ground because you're going to need those mats. And like I said, looting players in the late game can be pretty like unreliable. It can be inconvenient to do because of the way the storm is. So I think that's going to be it for this video. If you, like I said before, if you guys find it helpful, please do remember to give it a like rating. If you would like to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments below. Also subscribe. I do live stream every day, like I was saying. So if you want anything explained or you want to see me do examples of this, come to my stream, because this is pretty much what I do on my stream, especially late game, is I try to explain like what I'm thinking and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing so that you guys can hopefully win more games in Fortnite. If you did find this video helpful, remember to leave a comment, like I said, and I'll see you guys another time. Thanks for watching.